Okay, hello to everybody. It's a pleasure to present, to talk with all of you in the Brazilian Physics Society meeting. So we are discussing on this presentation about the science of global climate change and the environmental and socioeconomic consequences that we are all facing now. So I am Paulo Artacho from the Institute of Physics, University of São Paulo in Brazil. So basically, it's important to recognize that humanity right now is passing through three different emergencies. The first one, the COVID-19, and actually the crisis in the health system that is undergoing for all countries in our planet. The second crisis is, or emergency, is the crisis of the loss of biodiversity that's being extremely important for the health of the ecosystems in our planet. And the third one is the climatic emergency that I will talk more in detail right now. So basically these three crises or these three emergencies, they have important similarities. The first one is that science is key to deal with all these three emergency situations. The second, they are a result of the excessive use of the natural resources of our planet. The third one, they show that there is a lack of global governance to deal with these different crises. And the fourth topic is that all these three crises have very important social and economic impacts. But these three crises also have important differences between themselves. The first one is the temporal scale. So basically the health crisis that we are facing right now maybe can last 1, 2, or 3 more years. And the climate change emergency crisis will certainly last a few centuries, maybe 500 years, 300 years, we don't know. But it's important to understand that the loss of biodiversity is forever. Once you lost one species, it's lost forever. So basically, in these three crises that you are facing right now, I will discuss in more detail the climatic crisis. So basically, it's important, the first thing is to recognize that the climate change science is very solid. There is no other field of science who does so periodic and systematic review of all the science that's undergoing under a certain theme, be it particle physics or something like that. So basically the climate science does periodic reports by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, with many reports that are released every single year. And in addition to that, many other different entities like UNEP, like Food and Agriculture Organization, all of them releases very important reports in terms of how the climate science is impacting the whole planet on several different aspects. And to discuss what is the present and future of climate change, is essential to look to the past. So basically, this is a time series of 500 million years before present of the climate in our planet. So there was periods where the climate was much hotter, periods where the climate was colder than today. But the important aspect is that on the last 10 to 15,000 years, the climate has been extremely stable. So and this is what allowed our civilization to go over, to develop agriculture and to develop the society we have right now. It's important to understand that we are broken down is this climate stability that that humanity have benefited for the last 10,000 years. So basically, this is what climate change is about. Look into the past and see how disruptive the actions on climate change can be for the climate of our planet. And it's important also to know that the joint evolution of life and geology in our planet is very, very couplet, tied. So basically our planet has 4.6 billion years, and through the evolution of geology and evolution of life, we have passed many, many, many different phases. And it's important to emphasize that the Homo sapiens only appeared in the planet 200,000 years ago. So 200,000 years ago in 4 billion years is a very, very, very short time. And the Holocene started, as I mentioned in the previous slide, about 11,700 years ago. So basically it's important to recognize that our species, the human, that is one of the species in millions of different species on our planet, only showed up 200,000 years ago. So in a very, very, very recent time. Now, if we look over the last 150 to 200 years, what we see is that the socioeconomic trends all go up exponentially, like the world population, real GDP, foreign direct investment, consumption of fertilizers, and so on. And this increase in socioeconomic trends is putting a lot of pressure in the Earth system trends in terms of atmospheric concentration of CO2, stratospheric ozone, ocean acidification, coastal nitrogen, and so on. So basically, the mission of science is to learn which are the impacts of all this change in our society and in our planet. And as you're going to see, these changes are very important, very profound, and it's changing the climate in our planet. In order to quantify how far away we can go with the changes in our planet, a few years ago, a set of scientists sit down and analyzed where are the safe operating space for humanity. That is called the planetary boundaries. So they classified the 90 boundaries in terms of climate change, biosphere integrity, biogeochemical flows, ocean acidification, and so on. And they quantified the limit we should not have overtaking, and they identified that in 4 of them we have went too far. The first one is in climate change. The second one is in the loss of biodiversity. The third one is deforestation of tropical forest, where Brazil is a major player. And the last one is the changes in the biogeochemical flow, especially nitrogen and phosphorus. So basically, we are going beyond the limits on our planet, and this brings a lot of different impacts and consequences for humanity. These consequences can be scientifically. So basically here on the left, you see one of the covers of Nature. There are many covers of Science also discussing this issue, that is defining that you are going right now to the Anthropocene. That is a new geological time where the humans and our society become a strong planetary geophysical force. So this is a very strong wording for the impact that our society is having in our planet. On the right is the cover of The Economist from 2011 that is called Welcome to the Anthropocene. So this is not a scientific magazine, of course, is an economist. So basically this is also recognized outside the scientific field. So basically we are already in the Anthropocene. And there are a lot of different impacts associated with this. On the left here, in blue, you see that the human appropriation of production of biomass is actually very large. So this means appropriation photosynthesis is very large, to 78% in India, in parts of China, parts of Europe, United States, and also the southern part of Brazil. And this is having impacts in the ecosystems. One of them is the change in soil organic carbon that I think is very important. So soil is composed of two different components, the mineral components and the organic component. And through over-exploration of soil, we're losing this organic component. In several regions, we are losing 40 to 50% of the organic carbon in the soil. So this has important implication for future generations to survive in terms of crops, in terms of the health of the ecosystem. One of the issues is associated with deforestation in Amazonia, for instance. So when I started to work in Amazonia, close to 1975, only 0.5% of Amazonia were deforested. This in 1988 increased to 5%, and now is 19%. So basically, you see that that's a very, very recent phenomena. So the destruction of the natural ecosystem is intensifying over the last 40, 50 years. And this, again, have important impacts on the global climate system. Another important impact, in addition to changing land use, is the emission of greenhouse gases coming from fossil fuel burning. So basically, we see that in terms of annual global emissions of fossil fuel, basically right now we are emitting about 40 gigatons, billions of tons of CO2 to the atmosphere every single year. So basically, 90% of these emissions came from the burning of fossil fuel, about 13% came from land use change. So actually, we have to get rid of the combustion of fossil fuel, otherwise we will not be able to stabilize the climate, as will become clear very soon. If you look now in the more recent CO2 emissions, so basically we see that CO2 emissions in 2017 are 62% above CO2 emission in 1990. So even after Rio 92 conference, even after the Paris Agreement, emissions are still increasing fast and significantly. So we are changing the composition of the atmosphere. The concentration of CO2 before pre-industrial times was about 280 parts per million, now is 410 parts per million. So basically, with these emissions, it makes that the concentration of CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide are increasing very fast. In terms of CO2, we increased the concentration by 147%. In terms of methane, we increased the concentration 259%, and in terms of N2O, 123%. What this means is that one single species, we acquired the possibility of changing the atmospheric composition with important impacts. One of the impacts is on climate. Basically, a Swedish physicist, Svante Arrhenius, in 1896, quite some time ago, published a very nice and very important paper showing that if you double the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere, the temperature increase would be 5 degrees centigrade. So this is not new in terms of science. This is nothing let's say, different from what we believe in terms of science over the last 100 years. On the right, you see a newspaper magazine, a report from 1912 that shows that if you continue to burn coal like you are burning at that time, this will increase the blanket over our planet, that will increase the temperature in our planet. And it ends, this report, is that this effect may be considerable in a few centuries. So they don't know that this effect could be considerable in only a few decades after this journal was published. So basically, climate science is very well established since the paper from Arrhenius, the work from Fourier, and all the work that is being done over more than 100 years. And the CO2 concentration is increasing. So one of the question is, how do you know if this increase is due to the burning of fossil fuel? So basically, there are many ways to know that. The first one is analyzing the isotopic ratio of CO2, but a much simpler way to know where the CO2 is coming from is looking at the oxygen concentration. Why? Because if you remove a carbon atom from fossil fuel, burn it in our automobile, for instance, basically to form CO2, you need 2 atoms of oxygen for each atom of carbon. So basically, if this CO2 came from fossil fuel, the concentration, the atmospheric concentration of oxygen needs to be reducing, and it actually is reducing at the right stoichiometric concentration as CO2 is increasing. So basically, it's very, very clear that now this CO2 is coming from fossil fuel burning. So basically, right now on the left, you have the main sources of greenhouse gas emissions. Basically, 87% came from fossil fuel, 13% came from deforestation. And from all this that's going to the atmosphere, 29% is captured back by photosynthesis over our forest, 22% is being absorbed by the oceans that are becoming more acid because of that, and 44% is becoming continuing into the atmosphere, and this 44% is increasing the radiative forcing of our planet, is changing the radiative balance of our planet. This movie shows the global distribution of carbon dioxide. So basically, we see very clearly that most of the CO2 is emitted in the northern hemisphere, as we can see very, very easily. And then you also see that one molecule of CO2 that is emitted in the United States, a few days later will be over Europe, a few days later will be over Siberia, and will come down again to the United States in about 1 week. So what we learn is that the atmosphere is shared by all living things in the planet. So whatever we do in Brazil, in the US, or in China, or in Amazonia affects the global climate in a very important way. This movie shows the energy fluxes in our planet, show day, night, day, night. So basically you see that the tropical regions is where most of the energy is coming down to our planet to move clouds, to move the atmosphere, and to keep life as we know in our planet. So whatever changes in our tropical region, it will change the global climate in a very significant way. So this is important for Amazonia. And this movie shows water vapor and precipitation in the planet. So basically you see that most of the evapotranspiration occurs in tropical area, and the wind distributes this water vapor to temperate and boreal regions. So that makes tropical area, absolutely critical for the water cycle, and water cycle is essential for agriculture and it's essential for life in our planet. So again, tropical regions are critical for the stability in our planet. So we have many different evidences of rapid climate change, not just increase in temperature, but also increase in the temperature of the ocean, reduction in ice in Greenland and over continental glaciers, and so on and so on. So today there are a lot of different evidences that anybody, you don't need this, to be a scientist to see that the climate is changing and is changing very fast. So this is the time series of the global temperature from 1880 to 2 years ago. So basically you see that our planet have already heated up by about 1.1 to 1.2 degrees Celsius. It looks not too much, but of course for our ecosystem and for all the impacts that are observing our planet is quite a significant increase. But it's important also to analyze the geographical distribution of this temperature increase. So we see that over the northeast part of Brazil, the increase in temperature is already above 2 degrees. Over the Arctic region, the increase in temperature that have happened already is well above 3 degrees. So what you can see that this differential heating also changes atmospheric circulation and also means that over the continents where most of the population lives, the increase in temperature is already 1.5 degrees. So basically, where our civilization is structured, we already have a pretty high increase in temperature. If you look in more detail for Brazil, for instance, we see that in the San Francisco River Basin, increase in temperature of 2.5 degrees is already observed. Also in the eastern part of Amazonia, the increase in temperature is already very high. And on the right, we see the decrease in precipitation over the northeast part of Brazil and one increase in precipitation in the southern part of Brazil. So it's very clear the changes in climate, and this is extremely well documented right now. So basically, in average, compilation by the Berkeley Earth Group shows that the average increase in temperature in Brazil is already 1.5 degrees. So it's not a significant insignificant increase that we are observed in Brazil. And if the ocean is in thermal contact with the atmosphere, and if the atmosphere is heating up, ocean is also heating up, and water has a curious property that if you increase the temperature of the water, it's increased its volume, like it gets a larger volume. So basically, if the temperature is increasing, the level of the ocean is going up, and is going up quite significantly. Actually, right now, it has increased already by 26 centimeters in average. But if you forecast how much will be the increase in global mean sea level, it can be in between 2.5 to 5 meters. So this has an important consequences for the global planet and has the potential also to change not only the sea level, but also to change the geography of our planet. The National Geographic used the United States Geological Survey maps for topography and predicted that if you let the temperature increase by 7 or 8 degrees, and if you let Greenland get melted, basically Manaus will be underwater, Asunción del Paraguay we have a beach close by, and most of the cities like Buenos Aires, Montevideo, Rio de Janeiro, Recife, Belém will be basically underwater. So actually, we are also changing the geography of our planet with the heating of caused by the greenhouse gas emissions. So basically, the Anthropocene, the ocean are having transformation that they have never had over the last 300 million years, and they are getting 1 degree hotter. They are 26% more acidic, and they have 2% less oxygen in the water. And this is, of course, critical for all the biota that lives in the ocean that depends on this oxygen for survival. So essentially, in addition to changing the greenhouse gas emissions, we are also changing the energy balance in our planet. So we depend on 340 watts per square meter that arrive in average every single day in our planet. So basically, part of this radiation is reflected back to space. Part of this radiation is reflected by the surface, that is albedo of our planet, and we use this energy and we send it back in terms of thermal energy with a change in entropy, and the difference in entropy keeps life in our planet. And when this heat goes up into the atmosphere, basically it is trapped by greenhouse gas, is trapped by clouds, and this is what keeps the temperature in our planet as we know right now, because without the natural greenhouse gas effect, temperature in our planet will be minus 16 degrees, water will be frozen all the time, and life would not have happened as we know it right now. So basically, we are changing the energy balance in our planet. That is the most fundamental change we are doing in our planet. And IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, have developed a metric basically to calculate the radiative forcing of these emissions to the climate system. For instance, in terms of CO2 emissions, change the concentration from 280 parts per million to 410 parts per million as we have right now, have added 1.68 watts per square meter in terms of the global energy budget. So basically, we are adding energy to the climate system. In total, if you add up all the different components, we end up with 2.29 watts per square meter that we have in excess energy compared to 150 years ago. So basically, it looks like a small change in the 340.2 watts per square meter, but this is just a measure of how sensitive the climate system is to small changes in the energy budget in our planet. And what about the future? If you try to estimate the increase in temperature in the future, basically for that you need an emission scenario and you need a global climate system. And if you look into the emission scenario where you continue to emit CO2 as we are emitting right now, the temperature in Brazil could increase by about 5 to 5.5 degrees. Temperature in the Arctic could go up to 7.5 degrees. So that is a huge change in the ecosystem properties that will have a very important impact in our planet. In Brazil, simulations done by INPE shows very similar results. So this is the average increase in temperature that you can expect to Brazil. It's about 7 to 8 degrees in Mato Grosso, for instance, is about 6 to 7 degrees in the eastern part of Amazonia. So basically this you have a huge impact also on agricultural productivity in our planet. So basically we can expect difficulties in producing food with this very large increase in temperature. In the map at the right, you see a decrease in temperature, in precipitation, very strong decrease, particularly over the northeast part of Brazil, that will become an arid region, and one increase in the precipitation in southeastern of the South America. So basically, it's a huge changes that we are making to our planet. Amazonia, it's a very important global ecosystem that can be part of the solution. It's a very unique region that has global impacts on the carbon balance and also in the hydrological cycle. And the question is, does Amazonia will survive to this climatic change? So it's a question that a lot of people have studied, and one of the issues to this question is actually the deforestation in the Amazonian forest. So basically you see here that Brazil has a very important history of decreasing deforestation from 28,000 square kilometers in 2003 to basically 4,000 square kilometers of deforestation in 2011. And after that, we see a very sharp increase. So right now is at 10,000 square kilometers per year in terms of deforestation, and increasing very, very fast. So this is that component of 13% of the global emission of tropical deforestation. And Amazonia is critical for water vapor transport over South America. So basically Amazonia processes a lot of water vapor from the tropical Atlantic Ocean that is processed in Amazonia and irrigates the central and southern part of Brazil. So actually, we depend on the health of Amazonia to keep the water vapor fluxes to the most productive agricultural regions in Brazil. And the Amazonia is changing significantly. So basically, this shows the Amazonia River discharging Óbidos, Pará. It increased by 30% over the last 50 years. So basically we are observing an increase in water flow out of the basin through the rivers. So this means that possibly we are losing some of the water vapor that would be transported for central Brazil. So this can be a natural phenomenon. This can be driven by deforestation. It's really hard to quantify and make a clear assessment of this change, and science is studying this very seriously. Another thing you are observing is the increasing climate extremes in Amazonia. In blue here, you see the increasing flooding in Amazonia, especially over the last 40 years, a decrease in precipitation during dry years. So this means we are increasing the amplitude of climate extremes in Amazonia. So this is important because the forest needs to have a stable climate to be most productive. So basically we are changing the productivity of the forest itself. And this is important because this movie shows how much carbon the plants remove from the atmosphere. So you see that over Siberia, for instance, you have winter, then you have spring, summer, and so on. So carbon is mobilized from the forest to the atmosphere. But Amazonia and the tropical forest are the only permanent reservoirs of carbon. And Amazonia has about 100 to 150 billions of tons of carbon stored on the ecosystem. And this, for you to have an idea how much is this, all the fossil fuel burning is about 90 billion tons of carbon per year emitted to the atmosphere. So this is 10 years of all carbon burned by fossil fuels. So it's a huge amount of carbon that if you get released to the atmosphere will intensify significantly the climate change we are observing. In order to monitor the carbon cycling, we have a lot of different satellites, about 17 satellites monitoring carbon cycling and all accessory variables that is absolutely necessary for science to quantify the different processes that are happening in our planet. And Amazon is also changing, not just in terms of hydrological cycle, but the carbon cycling is changing in Amazonia. So basically you see here the net biomass change. When I started to do these studies in Amazonia 30, 40 years ago, basically Amazonia was absorbing significant amount of carbon from the atmosphere. Right now, the net fluxes of carbon to the atmosphere is virtually zero. And why this is happening? This is happening because tree mortality is increasing significantly. So basically, and this tree mortality is increasing because of the increasing climate extremes, where the Amazon forest that is used to have a very stable climate, we are changing this stable climate, and the tree mortality is increasing, and the forest is not anymore a sink of CO2. So basically, we have Amazonia in a previous state of equilibrium that is transitioning to a new equilibrium, where part we have stable forest and part you have savanna, as we can observe here. And the threshold between these different states can be an increase in temperature as low as 4 degrees centigrade or 40% of the total deforested area. So basically, we are halfway to the temperature and deforestation that can destabilize the Amazonian ecosystem with very important consequences for the global climate. Embrapa is also worried with the changes in the hydrological cycle. These are Embrapa maps that shows that the area with very high water deficit that is critical for agriculture is increasing. This is the average for 1986 to 2015, 2006 to 2015, and now for the next decades, and from 20 years from now, we see an expansion of the area with a very high water deficit that will have an impact, a very important impact on the agricultural productivity of Brazil. So last year, we have done a workshop in Princeton using the state-of-the-art climate modeling, and the name of the workshop was The World Without Amazonia in 2050. So basically, we made the simulations. How would the world look like if you deforested 50% of the Amazonia, or if you let the increase in temperature as we are expecting? So basically, we can expect an increase in temperature over Amazonia of about 2 degrees, in addition to the global increase in temperature of about 4 to 5 degrees. So this means a change in surface temperature of about 7 degrees. With this increase in temperature, the enzymes who controls photosynthesis starts to work outside their optimum temperature, and this means a decreasing carbon uptake and is starting to lose carbon to the atmosphere. In terms of precipitation, we can see that if you deforest an Amazonia, all the central part of Brazil can have 30 to 50% less precipitation than it has right now. So that will make agriculture very, very difficult in this area. So basically, also a question that science asks itself is how close to the edge of climate destabilization we are. This is called the tipping point of the climate system. So there are several tipping points of the Earth's climate system that includes, in addition to the Amazon rainforest, the melting of the permafrost, melting of the Greenland ice sheet, melting of the West Antarctic ice sheet, and so on. And one of the most worrisome issue is the melting of the permafrost that will release a large amount of methane. Permafrost is frozen soil that was frozen for the last million years in northern Siberia and Canada. And because of the lack of oxygen under the soil, bacteria have produced a lot of methane, and this methane is leaking to the atmosphere. And methane is a greenhouse gas that has 28 times the power of CO2 to making greenhouse gas as a greenhouse gas. So basically the cross section of infrared radiation by methane is 28 times higher than CO2 molecule to molecule basis. So this means it's a big an important possible change in our climate system. And our climate system is not changing only slowly for the increase in temperature and the changes in precipitation, but you are also changing the intensity and the frequency of climate extremes. We see that since the 1980s, we almost triple the amount on the frequency of the climate extremes. So basically, we are changing the climate system because we are adding more energy to the climate system, and this system is dissipating its energy. One of the ways it does that is through the climate extremes. So this is very clear, for instance, in São Paulo, so we have much more frequent floods. So USP have compiled the number of days per decade where we have more than 100 millimeters of water per day. Is a very heavy rain. And you see that it is almost multiplied by factor of 5 over the last 67 years. So I see an increase, a strong increase in the strong precipitation over São Paulo, but of course over all cities in Brazil. And one of the important things that worry us quite a lot is the impact of the food production in one planet that is 3 degrees hotter than today. So you see what will happen with Brazil. With the percentage changes in yield can be minus 30, minus 40%. So our capability to produce food for 10 billion people in 2050 will be much more difficult than today. So, and this is an issue that can bring instability over the planet, that can bring lots of migration to Europe, to United States, much more serious than we are observing today. So just to end my presentation, there are solutions to this situation. One of them is to make more efficient use of energy. We need to develop energy with no carbon. This is possible. This is already economically viable, like wind power, like solar power. So actually, we have alternatives to burn fossil fuel to electricity generation. But we also need to improve carbon sinks to large reforestation project, and we needed to have lifestyle and also behavioral change in the production of energy, in the transportation, pollution. We need to change the way we produce food, as I mentioned several times. We also need a way to use a little bit more biofuels with all the problems that they can also bring, because we cannot be certain to substitute fossil fuel in all the possible ways that you use gasoline, kerosene for aviation, for instance. So basically, and this possibility of change is analyzed by the World Economic Forum, that in his last report he released a few months ago showed that the 5 biggest risk in global terms in terms of probability are actually all of them associated with the climate change. Changes in extreme weather, failure in action in terms of climate, changes in natural disaster, and so on. So basically, these are forecasted not from scientists, these are not forecast from NGO or ecological organization. These are forecasts done by economists from the World Economic Forum. So basically, everywhere we look at, it's very clear that we need change in our planet. And IPCC give a recipe on how we can stabilize the climate in our planet, and the recipe shows that starting 2020 we have to decrease CO2 emission at least by 3% per year, starting 2020 until we'll get zero emissions in 2050. So it's a huge change in our society. And after that, we have to remove CO2 from the atmosphere, CO2 that you have already emitted before. That's the only way we can limit the increase in temperature in 1.5 degrees. And the Paris Agreement is the only international agreement in force, and if all countries fulfill their commitments in the Paris Agreement, the planet will still heat up by 3.2 degrees in 2050. But we know that Brazil will not fulfill his commitment, United States the same, and many countries will not fulfill their commitment. But let's do a simple calculations, very back of the envelope calculation. Let's assume that all countries fulfill the Paris Agreement and will allow the temperature in our planet to increase by 3.2 degrees. So this means in continental areas an increase in 4.2 degrees centigrades. And if you remove air pollution, remove aerosols that cool down the planet, right now they are cooling down the planet by 0.7 Celsius. If you remove the air pollution, this means we will heat up the planet by plus 0.7, making the heating 4.9 degrees. And we know that 8% of the global population will be living in cities in 2050. Basically, this will increase the urban heat island that will make an additional 1 degree. So this makes the increase in temperature for the cities where population will be living by 5.9 degrees Celsius. So basically we are heating up to 5.9 degrees in the cities where most of the population will live. So the impact in our lives, in our economic system will be huge. And that is the trajectory we are following up right now with all the emissions we are doing right now. And to end, it's also important to remember that the countries who contributed most to the greenhouse gases emissions will be the less affected by the by the increase in climate change. So basically, the vulnerability of the countries that are most vulnerable to climate change, mostly in Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, will be the one who will suffer. So we see the issue of inequality very, very strong. And then if you look for the consumption in 1 week, in Germany on the left, in Italy on the right, Ecuador, and also on Chad, we see that if the developed countries does not accept to reduce strongly their emissions, their consumption, basically there is no way that Latin America or Africa poor population could increase their poor standard of living. So basically there is an inequality issue that is very, very important. So science in climate change is the basis of what is showing up here, but science is not the only ingredient in our society. So basically also the economy, also the political issues, the governance and the law are important. And basically science needs to work together with all these different components to build up a new society that is much more sustainable, that is a society that can have some sustainable development as is the wish of the United Nations and all individuals in our planet. And to finish, it's important to understand that climate change is not the only change in the future. So a recent report that is called The World in 2050 looks for all these big transformations to bring the sustainable development goals into force. So this means to change the consumption and sustainable productions of all beings, including circular economy, reducing pollution, and so on. We needed to take into account the digital revolution that all our societies is facing right now. We needed to deal with the changes in demography, with the changes in education. We needed to deal with the increasing urbanization. We needed to build up sustainable cities. That is absolutely essential. And also to produce food for 10 billion people, use better use of the land, and change the way we produce energy in our planet. These are the 6 essential transformations to bring the sustainable development goals that are basically setting up, including Brazil, is one of the signatories of the Sustainable Development Goals to build up a new and sustainable society. And science is a critical ingredient in build up a new society. Here you see that in the inner part of the circle are the basically needs of the society. That includes water, food, health, gender, and education, and so on. And on the outside are the limits of our planet in terms of water, food, climate, pollution, and so on. And we need the critical science to put these 2 things together. So build up a safe and just space for humanity. So this is a huge task, and we need the science, the proper science, to develop this new and sustainable society. So basically, thanks for your attention. And the last message is that we need solid science in all research areas to find ways to use the natural resources of our planet in a way that is much more intelligent and much more efficient than we are doing it right now. Thanks for your attention.